Hi, I'm Tamitha Scove with your solar storm forecast for the week of September 1st. We'll begin this forecast by talking about cell phones in space. No, literally, your cell phone in space. Some of you might be familiar with this initiative because of NASA's recent successful technology demonstration that they performed on April of this year, in which they actually took a Nexus 1 Android cell phone and put it in a CubeSat package and launched it into space. And using its onboard microprocessor and cameras, it actually took pictures in space of the globe, you can see them there, and sent it back to Earth. Now, anybody who owns a cell phone knows how durable these things can be, especially when you throw them against the wall after a dropped call. But that's exactly why these things are so attractive for a venture like this. Now, the first generation only survived 3 days in space, but the second generation is going to have solar panels, it's going to have magnetics so they can do attitude adjustment, and it's going to have different sensors on it, like a better GPS receiver. And that's going to allow it to send and receive signals. So here's where it gets interesting, is that the ultimate goal for technology like this is to create a swarm or a constellation of satellites that then cover the entire globe, giving us access to Wi-Fi and GPS signals no matter where we are. But the concern is we might be lulled into a false sense of security when it comes to the reliability of grids like these during space weather events. Because space weather is still such a young field, even if you ask the experts, they don't know to what degree a grid like this would be disrupted during a space weather event, be it extreme or even typical. So what that means is that within the next decade, some of the decisions we are going to be making about grids like these and how to implement them are going to be very critical. And now for my latest forecast. The sun has been quite busy this week, including a southern hemisphere filament eruption and a 3.8 class flare off the east limb. Now that actually gave us an earthward directed ejection that we're waiting for to hit sometime later today. Now if we go to our stoplight charts, you can see back on the 28th we did actually get some storm level stuff. We've also had a little bit of unsettled conditions here on the 31st, and it's always nice. I appreciate Mars Stu and Phil Walker for letting me know that when I alerted them, they actually went out and did some solar storm chasing. So great, thanks. I'm so glad you guys got to see it. Here's some other beautiful aurora pictures from Sweden and also some aurora australis from New Zealand. Now let's go back to that flare. Now here's a close-up of that flare, 3.8 flare that happened on the 30th. There was an ejection associated with that is launched earthward. Now the prediction models show that it should only be a glancing blow, but because of the orientation of this slinky, it's oriented, like I show the arrows here, northwest to southeast. That means it's actually leaning into the Earth field of view, which may mean that it actually gives us more than a glancing blow. When we switch to coronagraph images, you do see it bowing off mostly up in the northern eastern hemisphere, but there is a little bit of a halo around the sun that shows that it is somewhat Earth directed. Switching to our prediction models, this is envelope. The top panel is density, the bottom panel is velocity. You can see that structure coming out pretty much to the east of us, but it is grazing the planet. But again, if it's leaning in, it probably will give us more than a glancing blow. But you can see that it's incredibly high velocity, so it should hit us with some kind of punch. Moving on to synoptic charts, these are charts of the entire sun showing all of the active regions. The east and west limb bracket the Earth field of view, and if you go to the far side over here, you can actually see we're following a couple regions that are circled here of new activity, but you can also see region 1836 is developing nicely. That's the region that we got those flares from. Switching to our disk view, you can see region 1836, there's a lot of black and white mixing, a lot of complexity. 1834 and 35 don't have nearly as much complexity. There's not as much mixing. So we're expecting to see more C-class flares from 1836. NOAA doesn't expect any M-class flares. The risk for those are still down to about 1%, so not a lot of disruptions in your GPS or your Wi-Fi from flares. But remember, we do have that coronal mass ejection that we're expecting to hit us sometime on the 1st. And we have this coronal hole that's rotating around, and it should be giving us some fast winds, so maybe some unsettled conditions or minor storming later on in the week. So as far as activity this week, it looks to be pretty exciting. There should be a solar storm that's arriving anytime if it hasn't already arrived. So expect that your Wi-Fi and your cell phones to be a bit disrupted, and definitely don't trust your GPS as much as you normally would. I'm Tamitha Scove. Thank you for watching.